Welcome everybody to the challenge. And the challenge is, long story short, 7.5 minutes. Welcome, Tasia. What is cool is that I am in Amsterdam and she is in
New York City. It was quite stressful at that time where all of our events were in person and there was nothing happening for in-person gatherings. So overnight, we pretty much went from a $2.3 million company bringing in over 23,000 people into the museum every year to zero. It just plummeted. And in about a 2 to 3 day span, we completely reimagined what our business model was, what our experiences looked like, how we interacted with the artwork, and transitioned all to completely remote and virtual experiences. And from them, we've seen that pickup. So it went from straight up, right back down, and now up again for just more virtual events than we had before for in-person events. Before our business model, we had 4 primary sections that we did within Museum Hacks. So we had our public tours for the cities that we operated in. We had family tours that we also had. So if you wanted to have a saucy bachelorette party in the museum, you could come visit with us. We also had our museum consulting. So we did do a lot of traveling to international museums, and we teach them and share with them some of our methodology. That was completely put on pause, as well as the public tours, as well as the family tours. The sector that stayed alive has been that corporate sector for the team building. So now with so many companies working remotely, a lot of museums also having their staff work remotely from home, we've been able to bring that same audience back into a kind of virtual event, sometimes discussing museums, sometimes doing some virtual tours, or primarily reimagining to create a new experience that's using that same power of storytelling and the same tour guides and their amazing charisma that we've been able to employ in the museum space itself. Right now, we went from a staff about 45 pre-COVID to now we just hit over 100 staff members, and our guide and our host pool is the largest it's ever been. And not only hiring hosts in our major cities, but we've been able to hire hosts all over the world.
What kind of role do you see museums play in this part at this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is a beautiful time now for the challenge that comes with it to reimagine what that museum experience can be like. A lot of institutions have already had virtual tours before. I do think there is something very different for going in person to be able to see the artwork and be there with another person and kind of the social experience that comes with it. We all have access to Google. We can all look up the information. We can see pictures of these famous artworks. So figuring out now what the new normal is, because I don't think too many people get the same amount of enjoyment Googling and finding the images as they do in person. So how can you combine kind of that social element, that area of expertise that you get by going in and hearing a guide talk about stories, and still make it feel authentic and unique and something of value that they can do from their homes? So instead of it being a lecture, how can they combine it into a trivia night where it can stay engaging? Because 60 minutes staring at a computer is very different from 60 minutes walking around in person. It takes a lot more energy and work to keep people engaged and with you. Yeah, well, I suppose looking at the different stakeholders, if you're looking at owners, now that I've stepped into an owner role with Museum Hack as of last year, the biggest thing is when business was threatened because we had all of the events cancel, you have a responsibility to not only your guests and your customers and the people that are enjoying your product, but you also have a huge responsibility, and the biggest responsibility to your team. So that was the biggest challenge that we got, myself as well as the other owners of Museum Hack, when all of our events canceled. It was all of our brain power put together to what can we do to reimagine this. It was quite an emotional moment, and we decided right then, we're like, absolutely not. We owe it to our team. We need to find a way to get out of this, and we put everything we could into working every single day to make sure we could turn it around by setting up new website products, by designing new creative outlets, by putting into using the same skills that our tour guides used within the museums and part of our tours, transitioning all those to virtual events.
How did it change the story and the narrative?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a number of things to change our stories when we tell them virtually than we would tell them in person. So one is you need to find out now objects that you can share, whether just in your space compared to just sharing images, because people looking at images, again, their eyes start to glaze over. They're used to sharing their screens a lot. So you might have to bring physical things in that you can show. So for example, here's one object that we used to have and talk about in the museum. I have now collected these in my home so I can bring them and I can show them up on screen. We also might ask people to get up and move around. So for example, if I was sharing the story about William, I might say, first person that can go and bring me a stuffed animal, find it in their house, come back and show it on screen, will get 2 points for their team if we had teams set up in this event. Linked with it, it's just a way to share the story. You can have something physically, and then you can also translate that sense of like speed and movement and space to the other people on the end of the screen. So those are what we call go and get it. So we try to plug them into as many stories as we can, ourselves bringing something physical to it, as well as asking our audience and our participants to go get something and bring it back so we can interact together in a space. So many people in my own network, as well as our staff, love to travel. We keep a lot of our identity, or a lot of our identity is linked with our ability to travel and roam and experience different cultures. Now being in one spot and not being able to do that, we've had to look at what are local treasures. So maybe it's checking out smaller museums that have been right here underneath our nose in New York City that we haven't explored because it was more, oh, we have to go to the Louvre in Paris. We have to go to the Kelvin Grove in Scotland. Like it's been so much focus back on locally and maybe the small hidden treasures that have been here the whole time that we just didn't notice.
Well, actually, I have to thank you. It was a pleasure to talk with you. We did 7.5 minutes.
7.5 minutes?
Interview. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and good luck with all the museum hack things. And for all of the people who listen, this was ICOM MPR, the challenge. Long story short, in 7.5 minutes, we listened to Tasia Duske, CEO of Museum Hack. Thank you so much, and see you next time at ICOM MPR.